All right, here we go. Suspend. You know the drill. Off to jail.
That's a war crime.
That's a one-year ban from the committee. Anyone who is persistent with what other presidents' efforts and what they have done and actions they have taken to protect the American people from threats in our own hemisphere. In fact, President George H.W. Bush authorized similar, but much broader and more extensive military operations to arrest and bring Panama's Manuel Noriega to the United States to stand trial for drug-related charges. In that case, President Bush deployed more than 9,000 troops into Panama for more than a month. At the time, all leaders of the Senate, including Democrats, praised that move. Unlike in Panama, President Trump authorized a much more limited military action in Venezuela with only about 200 troops inside the country for a couple of hours and a firefight that lasted less than 27 minutes, with no loss of life on the United States side, but significant casualties on the other side. This military action was incredibly brief, targeted, and successful. When bad guys are in the business of flying drugs into the United States, drugs that kill our children, hurt our country, violate U.S. laws, and destabilize our hemisphere, then they'll have to be held to answer for those actions, and that's what's being done now. Maduro was not recognized as a legitimate leader of Venezuela by President Trump or even by President Biden or by most of the international community. It is a service to the world that this illegitimate leader is no longer in power. Now the United States has a tremendous opportunity before us in Venezuela. Because of the complexity of this operation, there has been some confusion as to how it will be done. I've been impressed by the way you, Secretary Rubio, have explained the plan to me going forward right from the start. It is clear and it's doable. I know you'll lay that out for us here today. Venezuela's natural resources have frequently been used to bolster the economy of our adversaries, especially China. Through President Trump's actions, we have effectively cut off that supply, giving the United States tremendous leverage. After our lengthy engagements in the Middle East in years past, many Americans are rightfully concerned about so-called forever wars. I know this administration is laser-focused on avoiding those experiences. With Nicolas Maduro out of power, the United States has the opportunity to better protect America by bringing stability to Venezuela. The country has a history of democracy, capitalism, and a respect for human rights. It is only during the last two dictatorships that it has lost these attributes. The Venezuelan people are not strangers to these concepts and long to have them reinstated. They have you and the President Trump to thank for giving them another chance. It is all our hope that the Venezuelan people will soon be able to hold free and fair elections for their leaders. To get there, Venezuela may require U.S. and international oversight to ensure these elections are indeed free and fair, unlike their most recent elections. Secretary Rubio, thank you for being here today. I look forward to a productive discussion, and with that, I'd like to hear the distinguished ranking member's views on these matters. Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome back, Secretary Rubio. Thank you for being here. I certainly agree with the chairman in terms of his comments relative to Nicolas Maduro. He was bad for Venezuela, he was bad for the region, and he was bad for the United States. I think the question we have to ask now is, was the raid to arrest him worth the cost? And I also share the chairman's admiration for the military operation that took him out. But the U.S. naval blockade around Venezuela and the raid have already cost American taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. Outside estimates are as high as $1 billion. And yet, the Maduro regime is essentially still in power. All the same people are running the country. Maduro's vice president, now the interim president, has taken no steps to diminish Iran, China, or Russia's considerable influence in Venezuela. One of the reasons that has been given for the mission. Her cooperation appears tactical and temporary and not a real shift in Venezuela's alignment. In the process, we've traded one dictator for another. So it's no wonder that so many of my constituents are asking, why is the president spending so much time focused on Venezuela instead of the cost of living and their kitchen table economic concerns? Unfortunately, I think this has been a pattern across the administration, losing sight of what actually advances America's interests and delivers results for the American people. Take the elimination of personnel and departments that were critical to our national security, for example. These are cost-effective tools like Voice of America that help us advance America's interests globally. And Mr. Secretary, as you remember, you strongly supported most of these programs when you were on this side of the dais. The administration says those cuts were about saving money, but the total federal spending last year went up by 4%, not down. We spent more, not less. As a result, our adversaries like China are expanding their influence. And there is broad bipartisan agreement in Congress that China is the central strategic challenge of our time. The President himself has said that as well. But we're cutting foreign aid and diplomacy tools. We're leaving embassies without leadership. We're shutting down counter-disinformation programs. We are driving talent away from the United States while Beijing is actively recruiting it. And I would just like to point out, this is a picture of the globe. These are countries where China has ambassadors in those countries. All of the red, those are China. And places where their diplomats are on the ground, except, of course, for China, which is in blue, and they don't need to put diplomats there. This map, this is where we have diplomats. You can see the red is where we're filled, and look at all of the white, where we do not have ambassadors on the ground. We're even giving China some of our most advanced semiconductors. And after a year of tariffs that were supposed to make us stronger, China has posted the largest trade surplus in history. And American families are paying more at a time when the prices were already too high. Since the start of the tariff campaign in 2025, U.S. manufacturing employment has fallen by anywhere from 50 to 70,000 jobs, depending on whose estimates you look at. That's a trend that undercuts promises that tariffs would bring factory jobs roaring back. And instead of creating a united front against China, we're pushing our closest allies into their arms. Just look at Canada, whose business with the state of New Hampshire has been really critical. They recently cut a trade deal with China because they no longer view the United States as a reliable partner. Pushing allies away like that is not strategic competition. It is unilateral disarmament. We see the same gap between rhetoric and reality in how this administration deals with other authoritarian regimes. At a time when Iran is violently cracking down on protests, the U.S. is coming to agreements to deport Iranians in this country back to Iran, people who will face persecution and interrogation by Iranian security forces. And yet President Trump told the Iranian people that help was on the way. But the United States has largely stood on the sidelines as the situation has deteriorated. Americans are right in thinking that the Trump administration is tougher on our allies than on most of our adversaries. I just returned from Denmark, where I met with Danish and Greenlandic leaders. Senator Coons was also on that trip. He led it. What I heard directly is that President Trump's threats to take Greenland have shaken public confidence in the United States to the core. And this from an ally who first recognized the new United States of America in 1792, has fought on our side in both world wars and in Afghanistan. And I heard from one Danish-American woman whose son holds both citizenships and is approaching conscription age, that she's worried that her son might one day be forced to choose between the two countries that he loves. That kind of fear would have been unthinkable 2 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 50 years ago. There is no strategic objective in Greenland that cannot be achieved through cooperation. The only thing these threats have accomplished is weakening trust in the United States. That trust is the foundation of our alliances. And at a moment when Russia is waging the largest land war in Europe since World War II, we should be strengthening allied unities. Instead, we're undermining it. European allies are worried about open conflict with the United States. Canadian trading partners are turning toward China instead of the U.S. And the constant threat of new tariffs raising prices and making it impossible for businesses to invest is ever present. So From Venezuela to Europe, the United States is spending more, risking more, and achieving less. That does not project strength. It hands our adversaries exactly what they want. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. We're now going to hear from Secretary Rubio. After that, we'll do a round of 5-minute questions. And so with that, Secretary Rubio, welcome back to the committee. Love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'll be brief in my opening statement so we can leave more time for questions. I've submitted a written statement, but I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to talk to you guys for a few minutes. And
All right, here we go. Suspend. You know the drill. Off to jail.
That's a war crime.
That's a one-year ban from the committee. Anyone who is a persistent violator will be banned for 3 years. So don't know whether the guy falls in that category.